Be not so fearful, be not so frail. Someone watches you, you will not fail. Be not so fearful, be not so frail. Be not so sorry, what's done is done. We must forgive now, we must go on. And when you wake up, you will find that you can run. Be not so sorry, be not so frail. Be not so sorry, be not so frail. Be not so fearful, be not so pale. Someone is watching you, you cannot leave the rails. So be not so fearful, be not so pale. Be not so fearful, be not so pale. Oh, be not so sorry, what's done is done. We must forgive now, we must go on. And when we wake up, we will find that we can run. Be not so sorry, be not so frail. Be not so sorry, be not so frail. Be not so sorry. Forgive it as time. Forgive it as time. Forgive it as time.
Thank you, Brandon Pfeiffer, for opening us up this vigil so beautifully. Greetings, everybody. My name is Abe Bonowitz. I'm the Director of Death Penalty Action, and I'm sitting with you here in Alabama today. We just did a petition delivery in protest of the execution that is on Thursday in Alabama. But tonight we're here about Ruben Gutierrez and the possible execution tonight for a crime that he was involved with, but not the actual killer. So it's a little bit different tonight. We're going to hear more about that shortly. I do want to say that this is, as we always say, this is a space for people who are opposed to the death penalty. And we come from a variety of perspectives and faith perspectives and reasons to be against the death penalty, but this is not a space to debate the death penalty. So in the chat, if we see anything that's not that, then we'll be ejecting people, and that goes also for the Facebook stream and all of that. So that being said, as we always do, I want to welcome everybody. I want to thank you for being with us. If you've never been to one of these before, then you're going to get a mix of information about the death penalty, faith perspectives, information about the case that we're talking about tonight about Ruben, and we'll stand together, witnessing in a prayerful, protesting way as this execution, if it gets carried out, is carried out. So these things, if they go smoothly, we end up within about 2 hours, and sometimes they go on while we wait for the courts. So we're going to see what happens. We're going to hear about that next. But first, we're going to do as we always do, remember the victim. And with that, I want to invite Allie to play the prayer with Cantor Mike Zusman.
Shalom Aleichem, peace unto you. Cantor Michael Zusman with the thousands of members of L'chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty, and Death Penalty Action. If you're watching this video, it means that Ruben Gutierrez is about to be put to death and led to the slaughter by the state of Texas using lethal injection, as first implemented in this world, of course, by the Nazis as part of Achtung T4. The protocol used to kill people deemed unworthy of life, as devised by Dr. Karl Brandt, personal physician of Adolf Hitler. As we always do, we remember the victims. The alleged victim in this case of Mr. Ruben Gutierrez was Miss Escolastica Harrison. Escolastica Harrison was born February 10th, 1913. And she was murdered on September 5th, 1998. Her husband, Robert A. Harrison, predeceased her in 1991. We offer this memorial prayer now for Miss Escolastica Harrison. I invite you to send all energy her way and thoughts to her loved ones. The memorial prayer in the Hebrew tradition. El malei rachamim shochein b'maromim hametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina b'ma'alot kedoshim u'tehorim kezohar rakia mazhirim et nishmat Escolastica Harrison shechlecha le'olama b'gan eden tehei menuchata ona ba'al rachamim astirecha b'seter knafeicha le'olamim utzror b'tzror achayim et nishmata Adonai hu nachlata v'yanuach v'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Zichrona livracha. May the everlasting beloved memory of Escolastica Harrison be a forever blessing. May her neshama, her spirit, be a loving guide for all her loved ones. May those loved ones be comforted among all the mourners of the world. May no more blood be spilled in her name, but may the killings end.
Thank you, Cantor Zusman. Welcome, everybody, again. Janet and Allie and Rob and Charles and others will be joining us on this panel. Want to, again, thank everybody that's with us and watching. If you haven't done so yet, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat where you're watching from. And as we go forward, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them there. But now I want to introduce Rob Dunham, the Executive Director and founder of the Death Penalty Policy Project, who is normally with us. And we're grateful that he's with us here tonight because we're not sure what's going to happen tonight. And what we do know is that it's a little bit more unconstitutional than usual, I guess. So we're going to hear about that tonight. So welcome, Rob Dunham.
Thank you, Abe. I'm not sure if it's more unconstitutional or more of the same unconstitutional. The the executions that are coming up in the next several months, and including two this week, are again very strong illustrators of why the U.S. death penalty system is completely unreliable, and not just doesn't work, but is applied in a manner that that is completely unfair. Um, I would start with Ruben Gutierrez, and not necessarily with constitutional issues, but just think of what this man has gone through. Um, and taking nothing away from the nature of the murder itself, um, and the pain that the victim's family continues to endure as the legal process drags on and on. Ruben Gutierrez is not going to be executed for a murder that he committed. If he is executed, it's going to be for a murder likely committed by other people. And if we want to justify the death penalty, it's not justifiable to punish somebody for the acts and intent of other people. Ruben Gutierrez has been seeking DNA testing for decades, and his assertions have always been the same. Yes, he was involved in the robbery, in planning the robbery that led to this murder. No, he wasn't there. And no, he didn't do it. This is a murder committed by stabbing. So there is significant DNA evidence that is available to be tested and has never been tested. Now, Texas and many states restrict access to DNA testing to cases in which they say it can prove innocence. But Texas has a doctrine called the law of parties, which ascribes to every participant in a felony liability for the acts and the intent of others. So someone who was at best a getaway driver at a robbery in which he or she thought nothing was going to happen other than the robbery would have the same liability under the law as the gunman who went into the store and then gratuitously shot the clerk and customers during the course of a robbery. Their mental states are completely different. Their intent is completely different. Their culpability is completely different. But in Texas, it doesn't matter. Under the U.S. Constitution, though, it does matter. And in the 1980s, in a case called Edmond versus Florida, the United States Supreme Court said that robbery is categorically different from murder. And if you punish somebody for their participation in a robbery in which they were a minor participant, in which they had no intent to kill, in which they did not anticipate that anybody else would kill, and didn't know that a killing would take place, that was disproportionate punishment. You have to punish somebody for their individual culpability, their individual responsibility for the crime, and where their mental state went beyond, did not go beyond simply saying that they would participate in a robbery. That's not enough to punish them by death if a murder occurs. Well, if it turns out after the DNA testing that the testing shows that Ruben Gutierrez was not there, that none of the DNA in a bloody crime scene where there is a lot of DNA available establishes his presence and participation in the murder, then his status under the Eighth Amendment would be exactly the same as the status of the defendant in Edmond versus Florida, and the death sentence would be unconstitutional as applied to him. That's not what Texas looks at when it's deciding whether DNA is going to be available, whether the DNA can prove innocence, because their law of parties says it doesn't matter if you were involved in a felony at all. There is no amount of DNA evidence that could prove that you were innocent. So that's a basic issue in this case, and it goes to a question of innocence that we're seeing come up in a variety of different ways in the course of the next 3 months. Emmanuel Littlejohn is scheduled to be executed in Oklahoma in September in a case in which it's undisputed that there was a single shooter, and the prosecutor argued in his co-defendant's case that the co-defendant was the shooter. And then after the co-defendant received a life sentence, changed the story in Mr. Littlejohn's case and argued that Mr. Littlejohn was the shooter. The court said, there's really that's not prosecutorial misconduct because there's just so many questions about who the shooter was. But even accepting that as an explanation, if there are so many questions as to who the shooter was, then nobody should be executed. Marcellus Williams is scheduled to be executed in Missouri on September 24th. There is DNA evidence already in his case, and he is innocent. And Missouri is still attempting to go forward with the execution. The Missouri Supreme Court would not stop the execution, even though a hearing is already scheduled on the county prosecutor's motion to dismiss the charges against Mr. Williams. And Robert Roberson is scheduled to be executed in Texas in October, even though there was no crime. His child died of medical causes, but using junk science, shaken baby, that's been completely debunked. Texas went ahead and not just sentenced him to death, but sought a death warrant and obtained a death warrant, even though there is substantial evidence pending in the courts that he not only was innocent, but there was no crime at all. So that's an overview of the issues of innocence that we're seeing over the course of the next couple of months. And obviously, significant questions about Mr. Gutierrez's case. There is a motion pending for a stay of execution in the United States Supreme Court so that the court can consider a cert petition, that is Latin that the U.S. uses for a petition for review in the United States Supreme Court. It's discretionary, so the Supreme Court doesn't have to hear it. And that involves, the issue there is whether the Federal Court of Appeals in Texas disregarded prior U.S. Supreme Court case precedent on when DNA testing must be made available. That's striking, and this is what launched me on the sort of two long stories here, because 4 years ago, in June, 4 years ago, 4 years and 1 month ago, June 16th, we were gathered here wondering whether we would have an execution, whether Ruben Gutierrez would be executed. In circumstances in which Texas had just flouted a Supreme Court ruling on when religious advisors had to be permitted in the execution chamber. And on that date, Ruben Gutierrez came within 1 hour of being executed before the United States Supreme Court granted a stay of execution. And here we are 4 years and 1 month later, and we are within 1 hour of the execution. And we don't know whether the U.S. Supreme Court is going to blink and say, well, you know what, we stopped you from flouting our decisions once, we're not going to do it twice, or whether they'll have the spine and backbone to enforce their own case law. So that's where we are. I got an email from counsel about 20 minutes ago saying that they hadn't heard anything, and there still is nothing yet on the docket. So we're here and we're waiting. But one thing we do know is that whatever happens, the system has failed in this case. DNA testing should have been made available decades ago. And if there is an execution here, it's another in a series of highly unjust executions in the United States.
Well, you know, um, you're left without any words. I mean, and especially I appreciate when you pointed out that what Ruben has already been through, with, another night waiting to see if he's going to get a stay, which is torture plenty. And that's what's happening right now. I was just, while you were speaking, refreshing the Supreme Court site, still no word there. So I'm sure you're doing the same thing as you're talking, Rob. And, it goes back to the question we get to tackle every single time. What do we got to do to fix this? And can it be fixed? Or are we looking at just a massive spike of executions? Because not only are these executions that are coming up, we've also got Utah and Idaho and Indiana, and we're waiting for execution dates to be set in Louisiana. And who knows who else is getting ready? Tennessee, maybe, South Carolina. I mean, all these states are teed up to resume executions, and they're going to also be cases that all have litigation left to be done, even if the appeals are allegedly expired.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm an optimistic pessimist or a pessimistic optimist. And I think that, there are all these states that say that they want to start carrying out executions. But there were all these states that said they wanted to start carrying out executions last year. And there were all these states saying they wanted to start carrying out executions the year before. And it has for a long time been, this thing that's hanging out over the horizon. It's a dark cloud, and at what point is the lightning going to break, and unleash a whole just raft of executions? The answer may be that it won't. It may well be that there will be browbeating and chest beating, and a lot of talking tough that doesn't convert into actual executions. But it also may well be that we are facing an essential realignment in state practices. Project 2025 is urging the federal government in the next administration to clear federal death row.
And increase executions at the state level too.
That's right. That's right. And so I think that a lot may well depend upon the outcome of the elections in November. Certainly it will at the federal level. But depending on what happens politically in this country in the next several months, we will see what the stomach of politicians is when it comes to actually moving to carry out executions. It could well be that if Trump does not win, and we see a campaign that turns, as I think it very, very well might, into a referendum on a United States Supreme Court that's gone amok. If there is a sharp public rebuke to the U.S. Supreme Court in the upcoming election, that may cause a number of people who are talking tough about executions now to back off. On the other hand, we may be facing a huge increase in executions. We're at a tipping point, and we don't know in what direction it's going to tip. I will say, even if all the executions that are scheduled for the rest of this year are carried out, and several more, this will still be the 10th consecutive year with fewer than 30 executions. And before those 10 years, that hadn't happened in 3 decades. So optimistic, pessimist, we're still in relatively good shape. Pessimistic, optimist, it's a dangerous period coming up, but I think there is a good chance that we will come through it.
A good chance that we'll come through it. I guess we're going to see, right? We're going to see what happens tonight. We're going to see what happens going forward with the presidential election. By the way, I'll share with everybody that on Thursday morning, still yet to set the time, but we'll be doing a press conference about the Trump 2025 campaign plan and the federal death penalty and some of the stuff that's happening there. So more on that soon. But I want to just invite Charles, if you're there, if you want, or Ali, if you have any comments you want to add, and then maybe Brandon will bring us a song, and we'll get focused again. I also want to say that we are expecting several folks to join us who are on the ground or will be soon on the ground outside the prison in Huntsville, as we normally do. They're still traveling there or getting set up, but they'll be joining us shortly. So, Charles, you have any thoughts?
Hey, Charles Keith, Impacted Communities Liaison. Death is never pleasant, especially when you're looking at things like this, when death happens so naturally. And I bring that up because I lost a brother last week of a natural death, natural causes. But yet and still, he still lay dead. No execution, but still lay dead naturally. And I was explaining and showing that to my family. And it was positive proof that we didn't have to execute anyone in order for them to die. It is the most cruelest and inhumane thing that I could ever think of. When I remember that I had a brother that was to be executed. He was not executed, but yet here this brother died. So God has already put that death upon us. And it was just so unnatural. And here we come with executions. And I was explaining to my family, I've been to and heard and done so many execution visuals and rituals. It's just the cruelest thing that a human can do to another human being. I even think it's even higher than murder. It's torture. You keep a guy in a cage. You do so things. So, again, me and my brother, we talked about this. He knew that he was sick, but he says, Charles, these people got to be sicker than I am because they're out there purposely executing people. So I'm mourning. I'm grieving for a brother I just lost. I know what it feels like to fight for a brother that was on death row, and I'm thinking about the brother that I had murdered. So I'm going through it right now.
Well, Charles, we are all with you, and our condolences to you and your family on the loss of Harrison. And we will, feel free to stick around, but don't feel obligated. We're with you, and we are your community. So, Thank you. Before we go to Brandon, I want to just we'll check in here with a moment. Where is my share screen button? Ah, there it is. No, there's Imam. We'll get to you in just a moment. We're going to just check in here with just try Facebook. I'm sorry, this is Twitter. Keeps changing the way. Here we are. The way you set up your share screen stuff or whatever the buttons are. So now I figured out that. So this is a live stream.
Did that.
With the let's mute that. Some folks that are on the ground and they've lost their signal. Okay, so I was just trying to show the live stream from Huntsville, and it looks like Julie is there and Chivas is there, and then the folks from the Texas Death Penalty Abolition Movement are there, and we're all waiting for word from the U.S. Supreme Court. So, but we do have a special guest here for a moment, and this is unrelated to Ruben's case, but pertinent to the moment. Imam Aswan Abdul Adar is here. If you don't mind unmuting, sir. He is the spiritual advisor for Keith Gavin, who is scheduled to be executed on Thursday, and was just in the prison this afternoon. I invited him to come and be a part of this tonight, and just to share briefly what's happening, what your experience was visiting Keith today on death row, and welcome Imam Aswan.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. Happy to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. I was able to see Keith Gavin very briefly today because he was meeting with his lawyers when I got there. And the warden was very strict about the time today. Warden Raybon, that is. So I only actually had about 5 minutes personally with just Keith and myself. But just sitting there with him and his lawyers, he was very upbeat. He's very in the moment, very focused. They were strategizing every way possible. I don't know all the ins and outs and the details. I could just listen, observing. But he's fighting to the end, and he's using every possible means that he can to try to preserve and save his life. And he really appreciates everyone doing everything for him and that they've done over the years. This is my first time in case the execution happens, I will actually be there. We had 2 previous Muslim executions, one of which brought in another with Brother Dominique and Brother Joe James. He asked me not to physically be there, but just to support him spiritually because he had some things he wanted to do him. So this is be my first time actually being there. I walked the warden where Keith later took him there today. They said they were taking him there today. But it's a new experience. I'm learning a lot. The Bonowitz, our aide, as well as others, Mrs. Esther Brown, and a lot of things I've learned new from the inmates as well. And I wanted them to learn that this is not just a local or national, this is an international effort. I didn't realize how big it was. And I'm really happy to be a part of it. So I hope to continue to learn more from you all and to be a bigger and better part of this.
Well, thank you, Imam. That was your connection is a little bit choppy, but we caught, I think, the essence of what you were saying, and we're grateful for your check-in with Keith Gavin today, and we hope not to see you on Thursday. So,
Yes,
none of us will be there on Thursday. We're all hoping to shut this one down too. So, Rob, did you have any update? I saw you were looking at something.
Yeah, I was looking at a lot of things. I checked the orders page. I checked the opinions related to orders, and I checked the docket, and there's still nothing.
Okay, well, let's take a quick pause with Brandon Pfeiffer to reset our mood a little bit, and we're going to continue. Obviously, this could go on for a while as we wait for word from the U.S. Supreme Court as to whether this execution will be allowed to go forward. Texas is one of those states that will wait, I think, for the court to actually rule before they go ahead and kill. Other states have not always done that. Anyway, welcome back, Brandon Pfeiffer.
Regardless of the evil is brought against you, do not retaliate. Do what is good, regardless of what evil's been brought against you. Do not retaliate. Do what is good and live in peace. Live in peace. Live in peace. Live in peace with everyone. Beloved, can you leave it to God, who is just and can settle all scores? Beloved, can you leave it to God, who is just and will settle all scores and live in peace, live in peace, live in peace, live in peace with everyone. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Yeah. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Do not let yourselves be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good and live in peace. Live in peace. Live in peace. Live in peace with everyone.
Thank you, Brandon. Ali, we had, one of the things that we always try to do as soon as somebody gets a date that is connect with the legal team if they wish to be connected, which in this case they didn't. Connect with the prisoner. Cantor Mike Zusman always writes to everybody that gets an execution date. He never heard back from Ruben. So I know Ali had a little bit of communication with his wife, and I want to just ask you, Ali, if you have anything you want to share about what you learned through that experience.
Yeah, so I have never personally met Ruben. I have had some brief interactions with his wife over the last few years. When I was visiting Texas's death row in the late summer of 2022, his wife and I were going in to visit at the same time, so we had met outside of the prison before going through security. But this time when I was in Texas visiting the row a couple of weeks ago, I saw Ruben a couple of times actually. He was sitting right in the booth right beside where I was sitting, and I believe he was visiting his mother and maybe his sister or his aunt or somebody, but definitely family. And then I saw him again a couple days later, and it's just really I don't think startling is the right word, but it's just really strange to see these people that you've seen pictures of all over the internet, and you've maybe interacted with them, maybe you haven't, but it's kind of bizarre to see these people for the first time. And even though those of us like me that write to those on the inside, we know that these people are human beings, and that is fundamentally what guides us writing to them. It's so much more striking once you're actually there and you see them in the flesh. And at first, I didn't put two and two together. I knew that face, but it took me a minute to realize that it was Ruben Gutierrez. And I don't know, everything about this case is really, it's really outrageous. I keep finding myself saying that word a lot, but I don't think there's any other word that fully encompasses what this situation is like. And I did want to talk really briefly about, about a week and a half ago, I was in a federal prison in Virginia, the Federal Correctional Complex in Petersburg, Virginia. And I was visiting a different individual who they were convicted of killing a police officer, but it was a really crazy case. They were forced to plead guilty, even though they were acquitted, to escape the death penalty. But this prison was a medium security prison, and the visitation situation was very different than what I'm accustomed to on Texas's death row. And all the inmates and all the visitors were out in the open. There was no chains, shackles, cages, nothing like what I'm used to. And the person who I was visiting, he told me to look over to the other side of the room, and he pointed out this individual to me. And this individual, he told me, had killed 130 people. And he was just out in the open, no chains, shackles, like we were all moseying around together. He could have easily interacted with me or anybody else in there. And I just found this really striking because, I mean, we talk about the unreliability of the death penalty all the time and the arbitrary nature of the death penalty, but it's sometimes hard to imagine how arbitrary it is until you're actually faced with a situation like this, where one individual who's not in a maximum security prison, not serving a death sentence, killed 130 people. If you put together all of the murders from all of the men on Texas's death row, if you combine them all together, plus the people who say they're innocent, plus these law of parties type situations, I would estimate that there were not too many more murders of all the men on Texas's death row compared to what this one individual committed. And I'm not saying that to underscore the severity and the significance of all of those crimes, but it just, people think that the people that land on death row are the worst of the worst. And I think this incident clearly demonstrates that that is far from the case, far from the truth. And like, I feel more safe with the people that I know on Texas's death row than I felt in that visitation room with that one individual who had killed 130 people. And meanwhile, when you go to Texas death row, they are shackled up, their hands are shackled, they have a shackle or a chain around their waist, around their feet, one chain connecting them all. They have multiple guards like with them at all times. And when they get into the little cage that they visit, like that you visit with them on Texas's death row, they kind of have to like contort themselves because their arms are shackled behind them, and they have to fit their arms through this tiny little hole to get them unchained. And every time I see that, even though I've seen it many, many times now, it's really just devastating seeing people being treated like this, being treated like they're less than human. And it really makes me emotional every time I see that happening to them. And I just think about this incident in Virginia and how this one individual is, the vast majority of people who are uneducated about the death penalty think it's people like that that get sent to death row. And we know that it's almost never people like that get sent to death row. And they're being treated far better than any of the guys on Texas's death row. So I just wanted to say that really quick because it was really striking. And like, that was the only time I had felt even just a little bit uncomfortable or just like weirded out sitting there. And when I was visiting somebody who was incarcerated, and I don't know, I think people need to realize that it is not those people that get sent to death row. Ramiro Gonzalez was not that person. Ruben Gutierrez very likely did not kill anybody, and he's the one being treated like this for decades, denied contact, denied everything. And yeah, I just wanted to say that real
Well,
quick.
thank you, Ali. I see that Julie has joined us, and somebody has put in the chat that apparently in Huntsville they say he has a stay. So let's check in with the folks on the ground there in Huntsville.
Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Rinker.
I'm Miranda Uribe.
And we're here at Huntsville at the Walls unit, and we've just heard from the community here that's here protesting that he got to stay.
Will not get to murder anybody today.
I'm not sure if you can hear Miss Gloria or not.
Give Governor Abbott time to church and go to confession, and maybe he won't go to hell. Oh.
So this is what we're hearing. I don't know if there are any questions or confirmation.
I'm going to share the screen real quick. This is exciting news. It's always good when we get to not have an execution. And here is the order. The application for a stay of execution of sentence of death presented to Justice Alito and by him referred to the court is granted pending the disposition of the petition for a writ of certiorari. Should the petition for a writ of certiorari be denied, the stay shall terminate automatically, blah, 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 blah. This is amazing and exciting. We haven't had this kind of an opportunity of a situation in quite a while. So let's take if you can show us a little bit about what's being said there on the ground. I heard Gloria, and give us an overview.
Execution.
This is super exciting.
The killing capital of the country will be August 7th, a Wednesday. And Danny, who's being killed on August 7th?
Arthur Burton.
So that's all right. Well, that's Julie. This is just if you would, for those who haven't been on this before, just show us the space a little bit, and then we get to end it down.
Calling bird. Okay, Arthur Burton.
So right here, we're outside of the Huntsville unit where they perform the executions. If you can see across the walkway or the driveway, here is the entrance where the witnesses sometimes cross the street, but they're sometimes driven around to a back entrance. This is the side where the people who are in opposition to the death penalty come and stand. So you'll see individuals, members of clergy who are here to share their opposition to the death penalty, folks from the prison show, the Texas death penalty abolition movement often are here always. They create signs with the individuals. Miranda's here as a part of Texas People's Tribunal. Little Romero is here to protest the death penalty. He's happy that Ruben has another fighting chance. And yeah, we're just here as a team doing the part that we can do.
Well, thank you, Miranda. Thank you, Miranda. Do you want to say anything? We're glad to see you there. We're just with both of you out fasting for striving for justice at the U.S. Supreme Court, and glad to see you both there. What do you want to add?
I'm hoping
I just want to say how grateful I am that there's no execution today. It was sitting pretty heavy on my heart to this drive today and this whole week. So I'm really grateful.
Well, we can't ask for more than that.
Thank you, Abe. I imagine you've shared already with those attending a little bit about Ruben's case.
Yes, we have, but if there's anything you would like to add.
Yes, I would just add, I've had the opportunity to partner in this work with various family members of different people on death row. John Lucio, Melissa Lucio's son, Ivan Cantu's mom, Sylvia, and I continue to show up for this work because I believe that these lives are valuable, and I believe that the state is wrong in its attempt to show the world that it's wrong to kill people by killing them. So I'm here, and I bring my little son because I believe as a person of faith that we can do better, and that we should be the voice of conscience for everybody who's listening, and even for people who don't want to listen. I believe that we show up to show that this work matters and these lives matter. Well,
Julie, thank you for showing up today. Thank you for all that you do. And of course, it's always great when we go to an execution and the execution doesn't happen. It's a rare thing, and we're grateful. And we're just grateful for you and everybody that made the time to drive all the way there. Miranda from Austin, you from Dallas, Shavas from San Antonio or wherever. A bunch of people from Houston are there, and
yes.
Anyway, thanks to you all.
Yeah,
and
this outcome we could have. We're happy to do this work for these kinds of outcomes. We've got a happy little guy here to share as well. So yes, thank you for partnering with us, Abe, and everybody on the call.
Excellent. All right. Well, this is great. You don't get to have this kind of opportunity so often. So we're going to celebrate a little bit here, and thank you very much, Julie. So Rob, do you have anything you want to add? Let's see. Rob is probably figuring out what's going on. So for the moment, let's go to Magdaleno. If you don't mind holding your camera up a little bit higher, and welcome Magdaleno. Give us some positive vibes here.
Well, I'm in at the border in Nogales, Mexico, and it was great to hear about all the people that were there, and about that the appeal was listened to, and I think that's why we need to continue this work. We don't know when justice will come, but we must fight for it every day. So I'm here to honor. I'm having trouble with my phone here at the filling station.
It looks good.
It's great to be with you from a distance, and I'll be crossing into Mexico in about 5 minutes.
Okay, well, safe travels, Magdaleno, and we will see you, unfortunately, on Thursday. We may be doing this again, so hopefully we'll get a similar outcome even before we have to start. So
I just Gabe, that we have to remember that all of the people who have supported us and come down and demonstrated and worked on this, they're the heroes of America, and we had to hold them up in the right light. So I'm proud to be part of this group. Gracias.
Amen. Rob Dunham is back, and Rob, have you had a chance to absorb this a little bit and let us know what's going on?
Yeah, so essentially what the court has done is it's called off tonight's execution. There's a petition for review that's pending before the court, and so the stay will remain in effect for as long as they take to decide whether they're going to hear the case. If they decide they're going to hear the case, and the stay will remain in effect until they decide the case. But it means that at least 4 justices believed that the issues presented in the petition for review were sufficiently serious that the court needed to review it. And actually, it means at least 5, because while 4 votes are required to grant certiorari, 5 votes are required to grant a stay. So 5 justices at least felt that it was important to give greater consideration to the cert petition. And this isn't even inside baseball. It's the speculation that I say that I'll never do, so now I'm going to do it anyway. And that is that you can push the Supreme Court only so far. And 4 years ago, when Ruben Gutierrez got his stay, Texas had flatly disregarded what the U.S. Supreme Court had said in the prior cases dealing with religious advisors, spiritual advisors. And Justice Kavanaugh had given them a blueprint for how they could comply with the Constitution and carry out executions. And there are two ways. There are two ways that you could resolve the issue. One is to make religious advisors available irrespective of somebody's religion, so not have religious-based discrimination. The second way you could deal with religious-based discrimination is to bar all religious advisors whatsoever. And Texas decided that rather than be humane, that's what they would do. And the Supreme Court said, no, wait a second. Don't be. I mean, that's just bad. So they granted a stay. In this case, the court had previously ruled in Rodney Reed's case that there is a mechanism under Section 1983 of the Federal Civil Rights Act to try to get DNA testing, and they laid out the framework in which framework as to when a death row prisoner had standing to challenge Texas's denial of DNA testing. In this case, the question of standing is virtually identical, and yet the Texas court said no, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit invented a new standard for denying DNA testing. And it's a case of we told you how to do this the right way once, and you didn't do it. So we're going to stop you from carrying out an execution without going at least through those steps. I think that's what happened here. The other important thing to note is the cases in which stays of execution have been granted have been cases in which the court has granted a stay so that additional process can take place to determine whether or not a person is going to be executed. They have yet to grant a stay of execution to issue a ruling saying you're not going to be executed. So there's possibilities still under this order of an execution down the road, and I think that may be what has persuaded one or two or however many of the hard right conservatives to go along with it. That it doesn't rule out a later execution, and it also tells Texas, you stop flouting our orders.
Well, that's amazing. Rob, and hats off to the attorneys who, I know you know them, if you want to lift up any of the attorneys working on this. It's out of your old Philadelphia office. They're
good lawyers.
Sorry, I'm blanking on the name right now.
Yeah, Sean Nolan and Andy Miller are counsel who are on the habeas petition. Sean is the chief of the Capitol Habeas Unit, and they did a spectacular job.
Yeah, they're among the best lawyers in the country on this issue, and we're grateful that they were able to be on this case. So, Rob, there's one other quick question before you go, and we begin to wind this down. But Abu Musin, a guest on the Zoom, asked if there's any update on the Louisiana executions or the Joseph Corcoran in Indiana. And of course, we mentioned that earlier that we're just waiting for dates to be set in Louisiana. And of course, that's a date being set is in process in Indiana. But anything you want to add to that question?
I don't have any good information on Louisiana, but in terms of Indiana, there was a motion filed or a pleading filed to bar the state from setting an execution date, and the reason was the argument is that Joseph Corcoran is severely mentally ill, and he has been severely mentally ill for a long time. The evidence shows that he has a long history of paranoid schizophrenia, and with that, an assortment of psychotic episodes and delusions. And Joe Corcoran is not somebody who the prosecutors thought necessarily ought to be executed. And how do we know that? Because they offered a plea deal for life. And they also offered to drop the death penalty if he would agree to waive a jury trial. But since he insisted on going to trial with a jury, it went forward as a capital case. And the lawyers have argued in their petition, or in their response to the state's petition to set an execution date. They've argued that the decision to go forward in the first place was a product of his mental illness. And that this never should have been a death penalty case, and that the degree of dysfunction that he experiences because of his severe mental illness should be sufficient to it should be enough to bar his execution, but at the minimum, it should be enough to bar setting an execution date.
Super. And finally, just on Keith Gavin, if you know he filed a pro se motion on Monday, and I know that some of the issues are about fairness for him. But do you have any further information on Thursday's scheduled execution?
No, I haven't seen his pro se filing, and I just know that when I checked the last time, there wasn't anything that had been docketed. But with today's execution being scheduled, I didn't check his.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Janet, I wanted to give you a moment to offer us a prayer of thanks and anything else you want to say. And Brandon will have a closing song for us. And Imam, if you have a final comment as well after Janet, then you're welcome to offer that. Go ahead, Janet.
Yes, thank you, Abe. So yes, Father God, I just want to thank you for this amazing news that Ruben's execution has been stopped. I just want to thank you for all his attorneys, all the lawyers, for your guidance of them to help bring about this amazing news. And I just want to give you all the praise and all the glory in the mighty and precious name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you. Imam Aswan, a final thought, and hopefully we're all praying that Keith Gavin ends up with a similar situation, or a better.
Indeed. I would like to say congratulations for Mr. Ruben. It's definitely in order for all those who put in the effort for that to happen. In the Quran, Allah says, whoever saves a life is like he has saved the entire world. So may God continue to bless you all for this work, and may he continue to bless you all to help save lives.
Amen. Thank you. And that is a Jewish teaching as well. He who saves one life is as if he saved an entire world. Julie, final thought from the prison out there and under your umbrella?
Yeah, so we continue to remain here along with a few others who are, in a celebratory spirit today. Anytime we can put this off is one step closer to canceling it for good. Miranda and I are here, and as part of a young abolitionist group, we're believing that this will end in our lifetime. So to quote partially a verse from scripture from Job, let there be no one moment. O earth, do not cover our blood. Let there be no just end to our outcry against death. So thank you all. Anything up from you, Miranda?
No, I think I'm still in shock, and I'm really happy in the best way possible that there's no execution today.
You both are just glowing there, so we're all glowing and smiling. It is too rare that we have had moments like that where we get to cut it out early and not have an execution. But we're grateful for everybody. We're sad that until further notice, we get to come together again on Thursday also starting at 5 o'clock Central Time. And there'll be an email coming out probably tomorrow morning about our event Thursday morning, which will include folks on the ground at the Republican National Convention and others with direct connection to the federal death penalty and those cases. So watch for more information on that. And with that, Brandon Pfeiffer, take us out. Brandon, you're muted. Brandon, you're muted.
There we go. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. Oh, we shall not be moved. Our voices rise together. We shall not be moved. Our voices rise together, and we shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. Oh, we shall not be moved, 'cause a new day is beginning. We see a new day is beginning. We shall not be moved. A new day is beginning. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. Oh, we shall not be moved. We celebrate compassion. And we celebrate compassion. We shall not be moved. It's so good to celebrate compassion. Now we shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. Yeah, we shall not be moved. We're stronger together. We shall not be moved. We are stronger together. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not, oh no, we shall not, no, we shall not be moved.
Shavas, I saw you there. If you popped in, if you want to jump in for a moment, Shavas Watson, you still on with us? Otherwise, we're cutting it out. Everybody make it a great evening. Thank you all very much. We'll see you on Thursday.